you are a veteran of exchange programs, and Madam Lee has talked about the importance of connecting our two countries in a historic context. And while China is an ancient civilization, 3 of us on this panel are older than the People's Republic of China. And the People's Republic of China was a political human creation, as all political systems. The American system's 220 years old, so by constitutional terms, we're a little bit older. What would you tell students today who are really interested in understanding where China is moving in its grappling with the profound questions of political reform as well as economic reform, to specialize? What do you think is possible for exchanges and for priorities today for young people who want to do well by Chinese-American cooperation in the long term with an eye on these basic need to get ourselves in the same wavelength on these important issues of political reform?
You know, one of our students asked President Carter yesterday, what should I do with my life? You know, almost. It was almost, what should I do with my life? And President Carter said, the most important relationship is U.S.-China relations. And whether you're in business or education or government, you know, put your future there. I try to tell students, and there are many in the audience here, one of the most important things is to go and live in China and to go and visit China. When I speak to high school students, I say, you know, even if you just go for a week to Shanghai and try to stay a homestay, but just experience China, I feel that you have to experience the modernity of China. At the same time, you study about the government and the challenges that the government has. And you need those two things together, really. So when students study about the politics of China, one of the most interesting things is to talk about the trajectory of China since 1989. You know, at 1989, after Tiananmen, outside observers thought this government would collapse and would become a pariah government. No one could have imagined that China would have recovered so well diplomatically and economically. And so one of the interesting things to trace, really, is how has this government, the Chinese Communist Party, really learned from the mistakes of the past and tried to adapt to the current situation. Now, we might or might not agree with all aspects of this system, but watching and learning and really trying to understand what has happened, I think, is absolutely critical, so that you don't come in with just a knee-jerk kind of reaction.
Thank you. We have had some questions from the audience. I'll ask a couple of them now and see how far we go. One of them is particularly appealing to me from the Carter Center perspective. China has become heavily involved and invested in Africa and Latin America in recent years. What roles are China and the United States complementary or contradictory on these two continents? You have any thoughts on that, President Carter?
Well, yeah, the Carter Center has had, still has relationships or projects in about 70 countries. And we travel a lot. I've probably been in 15 countries in the last month. And everywhere you go in the world, whether it's in Latin America or Africa, no matter where, you see the burgeoning presence of China. Sometimes in a very benevolent way. We've been in several countries, for instance, that were preparing for a major soccer tournament. And we see a new stadium being built, and the leaders tell us with a great deal of pride and appreciation, it's a gift of China. China provided the money and the workmen and built this stadium for them. And obviously China has other projects where the government pays China to do very superb construction. So China is developing not only economic ties with countries that in the past were outside their purview or interest, but also ties of trade and commerce that are going to be permanent. And one thing that China is looking for with the prospect of enormous expansion economically is raw materials. And that includes not only oil, we hear a lot about oil, but also zinc and iron and gold and bauxite to make aluminum and everything else. So China is making investments there, and not only in minerals of that kind, but also in agriculture products, to make sure China has a future supply of adequate soybeans, for instance. So they're making major investments in Brazil. We see this all over the world. And it's a rapidly increasing Chinese presence. I don't see this as a threat to America, but I do see it as a demonstration that in a very quiet way, China is expanding its influence in the world much more broadly and rapidly than the Chinese leaders are willing to acknowledge. They are really aggressive and ambitious in planning the Chinese presence of friendship and trust and mutual benefit all over the world. And I think it's good for the countries involved, and it need not be a source of alarm to America either.
Would you like to add to that, Madam Lee, because I know you're responsible for a lot of exchanges beyond just the United States.
I would like to say a few words about the Friendship Association, where I've been working for 35 years. So the Chinese People's Association for Friendship with Foreign Countries was established in 1954. So we have a history of over 55 years. So in the past 55 years, we have already established friendly contacts and communication with less than 600 NGOs within 140 countries in the world. Not only United States, but other countries, obviously, including African countries.
I thought we were the only ones.
No. But I'm in charge of American affairs. But we have a lot of exchanges between China and other countries in the world. I will show you another example. We are authorized by the State Council to coordinate Sister Cities program. So since 1975, we have already established 1,600 affiliations between China and other cities or provinces or states in the world. So this project, all kinds of exchanges being carried on, including agriculture, including educational, sports, so on and so forth. So a lot of exchanges, we have been doing. So next year we will host the second International Sister Cities Conference during Shanghai Expo, in the World Expo. So we definitely hope President Carter could join us. You will meet some African friends, mayors or governors. So that will be in September of 2010. So I will see you there.
I think it would be a mistake not to mention the fact tonight that under Yahweh Liu's leadership, the Carter Center has very close ties with China, contract with the government of China for the last 10 years. We monitor the elections in little villages, for instance. There are about 600,000 little villages in China, more or less, with 900 million people living in them. And they're not part of the Communist Party system, but they have very beautiful democratic elections, which we monitor. And we now are expanding our relationship with the government of China to help with economic development in those little villages, and also cooperating with China in an interesting way in trying to improve agricultural production in Africa. So here, United States, Carter Center at least, and China will be working to improve the lives not only in the little villages of China, but also the little villages of Africa. Those are very wonderful opportunities for us to get to know the Chinese in the best possible way as equal partners.
It certainly is, and we hope that this can expand, and perhaps one way to think about this is having American students and Chinese students sometime go to a third country to create a more triangular understanding, because we're trying to exist in a very complicated world. Yahweh, you might want to say a word or two about how you've seen this attitude of China changing over the years. You've looked at it from an American perspective with regard to third countries.
I think